This is a tale about two port cities linked by one sea. A tale about the foreigners living there. And it's the tale about a promise of rights for outsiders, broken by old local interests. Filomena Viviana Tagliaferri studies the Mediterranean during the period 1650 to 1750. Her research project MedRoute explores identities and cultures in Mediterranean port cities.
I'm watching on how minorities and foreigners are mixing with locals in port cities and how they retain or they try to adjust to the new environment, they retain their original culture or trying to adjust to a new culture. This depends basically on the political environment of the specific city. If the authorities have the intention to stress the value of unique culture, a unique urban culture, so there is this tendency to be absorbed. If the political entities want to keep the community separated, these people are going to retain their own identities, habits, culture, and so on.
In the new port, Livorno, the authorities welcomed foreign traders. They wrote special laws called the Livornine. These laws let foreign merchants trade in the city without harassment. Shops were allowed to prepare food according to foreign customs. Minorities could build their own houses of worship. In Livorno, foreigners could trade without paying extra duties. The laws set out many other privileges and protections for outsiders. Foreigners could live in this port and keep their habits and identity, almost as if they were at home. A French diplomat saw Livorno's success as a porta franca or free port and wrote to the King of France.
So these documents I am looking through are about the Leggi Livornine, and these are kind of memoirs that was sent by a French diplomat to the King of France. I found it in the archive of La Courneuve in France. There is a kind of idea that these laws are very advanced for that time.
Not only did the diplomat translate all the articles of the Livornine into French, he handwrote detailed observations about them. The Livornine laws influenced the plan to make Marseille a free port. Across the waters in 1669, the French king Louis XIV decreed that Marseille would be a porta franca, a free port, open to foreign merchants and their goods. But here, the men of the Marseille Chamber of Commerce had other plans.
The Marseille Chamber of Commerce was an association of local businessmen that were organized together in promoting the interests of the local businessmen, so in promoting their own interests, which also mean in promoting the economy of the city of Marseille and of the region of Provence. In Marseille, foreigners were seen as competitors, while in Livorno were seen as a valuable element. So since they are seen as competitors, they are continuously blocked. So these local businessmen, they wanted to control all the exchanges that were happening in the Marseille market.
The Marseille businessmen's grip on trade in the port was so strong. Soon the French king received a petition from two Jewish merchants, newcomers in Marseille.
The two Jewish merchants, Joseph de Villarreal and Abraham Atias, that were Portuguese Jews that were coming from Livorno, were complaining, were actually asking to the king to protect them against the accusation and the attack they were suffering from the Chamber of Commerce of Marseille. Practically speaking, that meant that they were not able to live and to operate normally in Marseille.
The Jewish merchants wrote that the Marseille Chamber of Commerce was not just making their trading life difficult, it was making their daily life in the city almost impossible. What is even more inhumane is the ban on the butcher's shop to give them any meat, to force them from this lack of food to take refuge somewhere else.
Then they are protesting because they are not protected. They cannot buy, for example, meat from the butcher because they are refusing them basic foodstuff in the shops. Another thing that they are asking is to be allowed to perform their own religious duties privately. They are not asking for a synagogue. They're just asking for having the permission to do it in their private homes.
These are the actual evils suffered by the plaintiffs and those of their creed in your city of Marseille against the provision of your edict. So the applicants humbly beg your majesty to do them justice.
These two Jewish merchants are asking from the king to be protected by the same royal edict that has made Marseille a free port. So they are not asking special protection. Okay, they are asking to not be bullied, basically. But they say that since there is this royal decree that Marseille is a free port, why is not like this?
The Jewish merchants argued that they were essential to the port's success and asked the king to protect them. This is what caused the greatness and wealth of Amsterdam, Hamburg, Venice and Livorno. It should be noted that it is the Jews who sustain these places and whose trading have made them famous all over the world.
What is interesting in this story of these two Jewish merchants in Marseille is that the way they are presenting themselves. They are really advertising themselves as the most important element in a port environment to boost this economic vitality, to improve the wealth of a nation. So they are saying to the King of France, look, in other countries in which we are allowed to live, we have enormously improved the wealth of the nation. And they are quoting Amsterdam, Livorno, of course, and they are stressing as well their connection with the Ottoman Empire.
But the argument didn't work. The local businessmen of Marseille pushed out the foreign competition. In the 1680s, they convinced the French king to expel all Jewish merchants and later Armenians. But among the throngs of people in this port, one visible group of foreigners was always allowed to stay. Slaves.
Slavery, it was a common element in Mediterranean port cities, and what is interesting is the persistence of this phenomenon through the ages.
And through the ages there was a steady supply of slaves. Ottoman ships that captured Christian vessels enslaved the crew members, and Christian ships did the same to Muslim crews. Artists recorded the enslaved people, their exploitation and their back-breaking labour in marble, metal, and in books, like The Galley Slave by Jean Martel. In Marseille, Muslim galley slaves powered the king's ships, alongside French Protestants condemned for their religion, like Jean Martel. He wrote about Turkish slaves doing manual work for local people. Turks, not being chained, they obtained the freedom of the town on paying a sou to the argusine and find work among the citizens, such as splitting wood or other hard labour.
Jean Martel is describing the way slaves are living during winter, especially the slaves that were rowing on the galleys of His Majesty, the King of France. And he has a very interesting description of the way Turkish slaves were living on these ships and how they were spending their time, especially during winter. They were selling stuff, they were interacting with the locals. Local population had a lot of contact with slaves. In Marseille, they were working in gardens or doing other small jobs when they were free. For me, this is what is the most interesting and diverse thing compared to other situations. Of course, there were slaves. Of course, they should be recognizable, precisely because they were free to go around. But yeah, there was a great amount of degree of exchange with the local population.
Slaves even earned a little money by cutting hair or fortune-telling on the harbour promenade. Jean Martel and other writers described the Muslim slaves moving around Marseille in their daily life.
I'm studying visibility as an expression of identity. Usually this identity is negotiated. So the visibility itself is negotiated. You can be more visible, less visible, according also to what is allowed in the place in which you are. And these slaves that were obliged to be visible, they really retain their own identity in this way. They were forced to be different. It was a way of saying that you cannot mix, you cannot be absorbed. Even if you like this new environment, it's not for you.
The Muslim galley slaves were the only visible group of foreigner residents in Marseille in the early modern period, even if they never chose to be there. Visibility for them was not a recognition of a right to be different. Like the chains on their ankles, it was a punishment. And while foreign merchants were prevented from settling in Marseille in organised groups, the slaves remained.